You gave everything, and they disappeared. You showed up when no one else did. You stayed up when they were breaking down. You answered every call, forgave every slight, softened every blow, until one day, you turned around, and they were just gone. No warning, no thank you, not even the decency of closure. It's strange, isn't it? The more open you were, the easier it was for them to leave. The more you loved, the less they respected it. And somehow, you were the one who ended up feeling guilty, as if you did too much, as if your care was a burden they had to escape from, as if your presence, once vital, had become invisible. You never asked for much just to be seen, to matter, to be met with the same depth you gave so freely. But slowly, and then all at once, your emotional generosity became your greatest liability. You tried harder. You became softer. You tolerated more. You thought maybe if you just held on a little longer, they'd finally understand your value. But here's the truth they never told you. People don't value what they don't have to work for. They don't admire what they can access too easily. And they never cherish what never asserts its own worth. You weren't rejected for being too much. You were dismissed for being too available, too predictable, too eager to prove yourself to people who were never looking. And deep down, you knew it. You felt the silence long before they left. You sensed the shift, the distance, the subtle withdrawal. But you stayed, because you were taught that leaving is betrayal, that boundaries are cruel, that silence is punishment. But maybe silence is protection. Maybe silence is the final form of dignity when your voice has been wasted on ears that never intended to hear. Let's be honest, they didn't break you. You broke yourself trying to be digestible, trying to shrink your truth into a version they could handle. And all it did was leave you empty. You were taught to love, but not to protect yourself. Mirror question: when did giving too much leave you empty? They told you kindness was everything, that if you were just good enough, patient enough, giving enough, love would come back to you. Be nice, and you'll be loved. Always forgive. Good people don't walk away. They lied. What they really taught you was how to be compliant, how to be manageable, how to trade your authenticity for approval. They dressed it up in virtue, called it humility, called it goodness. But it was submission. It was the first layer of emotional programming that made you believe self-abandonment is noble, silence in pain is strength, being chosen means being pleasing. And so you bent, and bent, and bent until your spine no longer remembered how to stand. You became what the world wanted: agreeable, harmless, available, but not respected, never respected. Because what they didn't teach you was this: that love without self-worth is just dependency, that kindness without boundaries breeds resentment, and that a man who cannot say no will never be taken seriously. They never told you that being nice was often just emotional labor unpaid, that people who ask you to always understand are often the ones who never try to understand you back. They told you to be soft, but they forgot to tell you when to be steel. They told you to listen, but not when to walk away. They taught you to be a servant, not a sovereign, because a sovereign man makes people uncomfortable. He sets terms. He walks when he is not valued. He chooses silence when words are wasted. And that kind of man is dangerous to a system built on obedience. So instead, they sold you a quieter prison. Good boy, morality. Nice guy ethics. Be small, be sweet, be safe. And if it hurts, just smile harder. Don't question the pain, question yourself. But what if the programming was the problem all along? What if love doesn't mean dissolving into what others want? What if peace isn't found in approval, but in your ability to stand, even when you're misunderstood? Because here's the brutal truth. They taught you to be a tool, not a man. Mirror question: what belief have you carried that kept you powerless? Power isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. True power is emotional control, not control over others, but over yourself. Because in every relationship, whether romantic or social. The one who needs less holds more. The one who is willing to walk away sets the rules. You were taught that love means giving endlessly, but the moment you give without limit, you hand over your power. Why? Because emotions are currency. And if you flood the market, you devalue yourself. You text first. You apologize first. You compromise first. Every single time. And in doing so, you become predictable. And in predictability, you lose leverage. People may like you for it, but they will never fear losing you. And without that fear, there is no respect. Think about it. What happens when you stop replying so quickly? When you take your time? When you don't always explain your silence? People lean in. They feel the vacuum. Because now, your attention costs something. And value always rises when supply becomes scarce. As Nietzsche once wrote, "He who loves least controls most." It's brutal, but it's true. And it doesn't mean you become heartless. It means you become selective. It means you learn to feel deeply, but not give recklessly. Because love, respect, attention, they are all negotiations. And the one who can withhold decides the terms. The man who never pauses, never pulls back, never lets others feel his absence, is the man everyone expects to stay forever, no matter how he's treated. That is not strength. That is servitude. So let this sink in. Neediness is the tax you pay for disowning your value. Silence. Chosen not for sadists, the language of high worth. You want real power? Don't raise your voice. Raise your standard. Mirror question. Where in life have you traded power for peace? You kept showing up. You kept giving. You stayed. Long after the silence became deafening, you tried to be consistent, to be dependable, to be the good man, the one who never walks, never wavers, never asks for more. But somewhere along the line, they stopped seeing you. They stopped hearing you. Not because you became less, but because you became predictable. You showed up so much, they started believing you'd never leave, that your presence was permanent, that your effort was obligation. And just like that, you disappeared, not in body, but in significance. Because when you are always there, you start to become part of the furniture. Reliable, useful, silent, but ultimately invisible. That's the quiet collapse. The moment a man wakes up and realizes he's not loved, he's used. You weren't chosen. You were convenient. And the more you tolerated, the more you trained them to expect your silence. You didn't become irrelevant overnight. It happened every time you said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. Every time you accepted less, hoping it would one day become more. Every time you mistook loyalty for worth. But this is the truth no one tells you. You were never respected because you never required it. Respect is not given to those who over-explain, or overcompensate, or overstay. Respect is born in boundaries, in absence, in the quiet decision to no longer be where your value is ignored. And when you don't require that, when you shrink, bend, conform, appease, you don't look strong. You look safe, like someone who can be ignored without consequence. And that's exactly what they did. You thought love was staying, but love without self-worth is just sacrifice. And sacrifice without recognition becomes self-erasure. So here's your wake-up call. If they no longer fear losing you, it's because you've never shown them what that looks like. Mirror question. Who stopped valuing you the moment you became predictable? No one saw it coming, not even you. Because it didn't start with a scream. It didn't begin with anger or revenge. There was no announcement, no final argument, no grand exit. It began in silence. In that still, hollow moment when you finally admitted, this is not love, this is not respect, and this is no longer who I am. You didn't slam the door. You simply stopped knocking. You didn't block them. You just stopped chasing clarity from people who thrive on confusion. You didn't beg to be understood. You just started understanding yourself. This is how the inner rebellion begins. Not with fire, but with withdrawal. A soft, disciplined retreat. from everything that once drained you. And suddenly, you weren't reacting. You were observing. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped defending your softness. You stopped giving second chances to people who never even earned the first. You looked in the mirror, and for the first time in years, you didn't see a pleaser. You didn't see a fixer. You didn't see a desperate boy trying to earn love. You saw a man, alone, maybe, but finally whole. And in that wholeness, something terrifying happened. To them, they felt your absence. Not just physically, but energetically. They noticed your stillness, your restraint, the terrifying power of someone who no longer needs the game. Because when you stop proving, you start observing. And observation is dangerous. It means you see things for what they really are, not what you wish they could be. Your silence became a mirror, and they hated what it reflected. As Epictetus said, silence is better than unnecessary words. And in your silence, they heard everything. The years of neglect, the subtle betrayals, the 1,000 tiny dismissals. Now, without your noise, they can't hide from their own. They used to feed on your explanations, your comfort, your approval. But now, your silence disturbs those who fed on your noise. And you didn't become cold. You became clear. Clear about what you allow. Clear about who gets your time. Clear that not everyone deserves access to your soul. This is not bitterness. This is awakening. Because a man who reclaims his peace, who stops chasing closure, validation, and apology, is a man no one can manipulate again. They will call you distant. They will say, you've changed. But the truth is you just remembered who you were before they taught you to forget. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them miss the version of you they could control. That version is gone. This is the man who stands in quiet defiance. This is the man who does not explain his absence. This is the man who finally chooses himself. Mirror question. What happens when you stop proving and start observing? They'll call you cold, emotionless, cruel. But that's only because you stop leaking. You stop bleeding for people who never brought a bandage. See, they were never afraid of your anger. They were afraid of your absence. Afraid of your distance. Afraid that your love was no longer available on tap. But here's the truth they don't want to admit. Silence is not hostility. Distance is not hatred. And coldness is not cruelty. It's control, emotional discipline, a sacred boundary between your heart and their chaos. You're not cold because you stopped over-explaining. You're not cruel because you chose not to respond. You're not heartless because you no longer absorb everyone's pain as your own. You simply realized, not every emotion deserves an audience. Not every call deserves an answer. And not every problem is yours to solve. You used to think loving meant carrying everything, but now you understand. Loving also means letting go. You don't stop caring. You just stop bleeding in front of people who only noticed when the floor was red. Because the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who yells. It's the one who feels deeply and chooses not to reveal it. Coldness, when chosen, is not absence of emotion. It's the highest form of emotional sovereignty. It's clarity dressed in stillness. As Krishnamurti once wrote, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to walk away from sickness. They'll tell you you've changed, that you used to be more open, more soft, more available, and you'll smile not to be polite, but because you know now, they weren't asking for love. They were asking for access. And access is no longer free. So yes, call it cold if you want. But the truth is far more terrifying. You don't stop caring. You stop leaking. Mirror question. When was distance the kindest choice you made? At first, they don't notice. They think your silence is just another mood, a phase, a tactic. They think you'll come back, like always. But you don't. You've unplugged. Not in anger, not to punish, but because you're done. And that's when it starts. The echo, the hollow space where your presence used to be. The questions they ask themselves in the quiet. the weight of your absence pressing heavier than your words ever did. Because here's the paradox. You were never more powerful than the moment you walked away. Not slammed the door, just stepped back. And in that step, you became real. Not as someone who could be summoned, but as someone who could be lost. And that terrifies them. See, people don't notice the warmth of your presence until it's replaced with the chill of your withdrawal. They don't notice how much energy you poured in until it stops flowing. And suddenly they're cold. They're confused. They're scrambling to understand what changed. But nothing changed. They just never paid attention when you were bleeding for them. Now they feel it. Not the man who begged, explained, or justified, but the man who simply vanished with his dignity intact, because rejection doesn't haunt them. Your indifference does. You became unpredictable, unreachable, unbothered. You're no longer in orbit, no longer available, no longer feeding the emotional machine they use to fuel their own significance. And this is where your power multiplies. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't ask to be seen. You let the echo do the work. Because when you stop giving, they start remembering. Your thoughtfulness, your loyalty, your presence that never asked for anything but was always there. But now you've gone quiet. And that quiet is deafening. As Khalil Gibran once said, "Ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation?" And your separation was your sentence. Not to punish them, but to finally liberate yourself. You're not seeking closure. You're not hoping they get it. You've made peace with the echo, because now your absence haunts them more than your presence ever moved them. Mirror question. Who noticed your worth only after you walked away? He walks differently now. Not faster, not louder. Just firmer. There's no urgency in his steps. No need to explain where he's going, or why. Because this man doesn't chase. He doesn't need to. He doesn't plead to be chosen. He doesn't perform to be accepted. He doesn't beg to be understood. He simply is. The man who doesn't chase is not bitter. He is not closed off. He is not broken. He has simply outgrown the need to be decoded. He no longer lowers his frequency to match the chaos. He no longer enters rooms trying to be liked. He no longer hands out pieces of himself in hopes that someone will complete the puzzle. This man is whole. And in his wholeness, there is a terrifying calm. Not because he is distant, but because he is free. He doesn't seek comfort in attention. He doesn't build his worth from reaction. He knows who he is, and that is enough. You won't hear him arguing for his value. You won't see him chasing closure. You won't find him in places where his presence is questioned, because he understands every explanation is a transaction, and he no longer negotiates his truth. You can misunderstand him. You can label him cold. You can even walk away. He won't stop you, because he never chained you. He offered himself, and that offer was either seen or wasted. There's no resentment in him now, only clarity. The kind of clarity that shakes people, because it reflects everything they cannot control, everything they once took for granted. And when you finally ask, why did he change? Why doesn't he fight for me anymore? Why does his silence cut so deep? The answer will be simple. Because he stopped needing to be understood and chose to just be. As Jung once hinted, the man who looks outside dreams. The man who looks inside awakens. And now, the truly powerful man is the one who no longer needs to explain his silence. Mirror question. What would happen if you let go of being understood and chose to just be?